Okay, cool. So now, say you've collected all this qualitative data. Now, what do you actually do with it? So it's going to be super messy. It's going to be unstructured. You're not going to have it nice and quantified like you would with quantitative research. So some examples. Of things that you could do with the data is, one, you can convert it into forms that will be easy to organize and analyze. So an example of that is, say you took a bunch of audio recordings of interviews that you've conducted. Well, now you can actually move them over to your computer, you can tag them, date them, organize them in that way, structure them in some way that you could then easily go and find. And that also ties into number 2, which is organizing the data in a preliminary, superficial way. So another way is chronological order. Just kind of structure it because it's so unstructured when you actually go and retrieve this data. Another strategy you could do is identifying categories that are likely to be helpful in coding the data. So the step after you organize and analyze your data is you have to code it, which means you're going to put basically different tags on it and then analyze that later. So some things that you can look for preliminary categories are things like actions or emotions or beliefs or values that, say, people are expressing in the data that you've collected. So an example would be in audio data, right? If a recording, you just hear like sadness in their voice. Perfect, that could be one of the categories that you're transcribing. Another thing you can do is divide the data into meaningful units. Let's see. So just break it into smaller segments. Of course, like interviews are going to be long, kind of breaking those up, organizing them in the way that you could then go back later and really quickly see what your data means. It's very useful. What else could you do? So yeah, you can apply an initial coding scheme. So after you identified some base categories of your data, say emotions, for example, now you could go in and apply that coding scheme to a subset. You can see if that coding scheme makes sense for your data. And if it doesn't, if you find that some of your data actually has other qualities, then you have to go back and you add to your coding scheme. Let's see. Another strategy, jumping down to the 7th one on this list, we can actually get multiple coders multiple raters to code the data, which will ensure validity of your data. So if you're just using a single rater to go through and, say, transcribe your audio and code it into whatever categories you've chosen, that's not super reliable. There could be bias, a bunch of other things could impact that. So having multiple people go through and you ensure that 2 people will code the same data in the same way, that ensures validity. Okay. Cool. All right, so if you want to do some data analysis for a particular methodology of qualitative research, so grounded theory, for example, the goal here is we want a new theory to come out of this data that we've collected. Of course, then, data is critical. This is what we're drawing all of our conclusions from. One of the widely used methods, which is in the book, I'll go into a bit of detail right here. So first, you do some open coding. And what this means, you basically divide your data into segments, identify categories. Again, this is going back to different strategies. And then you continue collecting data until you run out of all possible categories. And an example down here, which I grabbed from the source down here. So they did some research collecting participants' responses to this question. And a lot of them answered, we're seeking experience. We're hungry for responsibility. So what you could gain from that is that they're seeking credentials or feeling ambitious. And what you would code that as is they're learning, they're wanting something, they're experiential. The next step is axial coding, which you choose a single category from back here, and then you dive a little bit deeper into that, and you try to revolve your study around that single code. So an example here is, okay, these people want to make a difference, and then you could axial code that as they're ready to set loose on accounts. They want to make some difference in public relations. Third step is then you do selective coding in theory development. So the original goal here is to actually build a theory out of your data, and this is the step that could do that. So now that you have your selective and axial codes, you choose your single category, and then you develop your theory around that. And then also in the book, they suggest the term emergent theory instead of grounded theory study, and it kind of makes sense to me because you're drawing a theory out of the data. Both of them make sense actually. Okay, and now to go from grounded theory over to content analysis, just an example of how you would do data analysis here. The goal of a content analysis study is to determine the contents of verbal or nonverbal materials. So that could be art, or it could be just spoken word audio recordings, like I said. And of course, this will involve both qualitative and quantitative, because say you have a piece of art, you'll have to look at the qualities of that, and over a sample, then you'll have to actually say, okay, how many people had this in their image? How many people had this? And then you could draw conclusions from that. So one example here from the book is that children at various grade levels were asked to draw a map. On the left, we have a 6-year-old map. On the right, we have a 13-year-old map. And just by looking at this, you can see that there's inherent structure to this that's different. So, of course, there'll be different qualities that we can extract from this. Some of those, detail, perspective, scale, for example, labels, signage, and actions. In the 6-year-old's drawing, you see that, well, you can't really tell, but this is a bus, and it says thank you. So the 6-year-old associates going on the bus, saying thank you, and that's something that's very specific to that group. And then the researchers, of course, must make decisions based on this data, find different commonalities between them. All right. So then diving into some practical applications of how you could actually organize your data and how to do analysis and what else you can gain from looking at different researchers. The book suggests, of course, you use a computer database to record all your information. It's 2017. There's tons of free software available, or some paid as well. You can use a simple spreadsheet if your data allows for it. Make backups, of course. And then, of course, there's no right way to analyze data, especially qualitative data. There's a complete checklist in the book. I couldn't include it here, but it runs through many of the different questions you would like to ask yourself about analyzing your data. And then, of course, you can learn from people who've already done this. So go out there, read qualitative research studies, specifically seek them if you're interested, and see how they've approached problems, tackled them, how they've constructed their research, their qualitative research, how they conducted interviews, how they organize their data, if they do include that. There's plenty of material online. There's another checklist in the book as well that is quite helpful for evaluating your studies.